The Premier League is back and underway. Finally, I haven't been counting down, you have. I'm excited, it's back. And we kicked it off with, I'm not going to say a great game, but Man United versus Fulham in what was a rather tense affair. I mean, Man United fans will be happy, a goal from their new signing, we'll cover that a bit later. Relatively okay looking tactics, improvements from Ten Hag, and obviously most importantly, they got 3 points. That's what all the fans wanted. Getting the first win under their belt is going to be crucial just to get them in a bit of a good run, get some momentum going, get that hope up. And they did it in a pretty interesting way. But before we take a look into the tactics, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. We're on the road to 1k by the end of the year. Hit that like button as well if you like what you see here today. But let's have a look at how the team set up. So both teams set up in a 4-2-3-1 formation, as we can see on screen. We're going to start with when Fulham had the ball, because that was less common. There's more to talk about when Man United had the ball. So Man United defended in a pretty, I don't want to say passive, but it wasn't a high intensity 4-4-2. It sat something like this. You could argue it was a 4-2-4, but it wasn't anything too exciting. It was just rather basic, just a normal 4-4-2. And Fulham decided to attack in, I'm going to say it was a 2-3-5. It varied a few times, but we've got Muniz, who kind of occupied both Maguire and Martinez. Iwobi and Mazraoui were isolated. Traore and Dalot were kind of isolated. And then Smith Rowe and Pereira picked up the half spaces as the number 8 behind Muniz. And then Lukic would either occupy this kind of position in a, I'm going to say a 2-3 build, or occasionally you'd see Robinson hold back as well, and Tete would kind of push forward a little bit, or Pereira would drop deep and Tete would make the run in behind. So we did see a few alternatives, but I'm going to say the majority of the time they attacked in this kind of formation, this 2-3-5 build. And I think Man United dealt with it pretty well. There wasn't anything major that stood out to me as a concern. The only thing I will say is Fulham like to get their number 8 in the gaps between Mainu and Maguire, or in between Casemiro and Martinez. They like to go in between the defensive line and the midfield line. And it meant that unless Maguire or Martinez jumped out, there was quite often space for these two guys to be on the ball. They would quite happily pick the ball up in the pockets, turn and try and lay it off to one of the wide players or into Muniz, into his feet. And I don't think it was necessarily a great cause for concern. We did see this isolation out on this side as well, the Dalot versus Traore competition. Traore often did get the 1-versus-1 against Dalot. It was kind of 50-50. Half the time Traore got in behind, and half the time Dalot defended it quite well. And we did also see Traore beat Martinez a few times, but the end product wasn't quite there. I mean, we saw that counter-attack that was a 2-versus-1. I think it was Iwobi and Pereira against Maguire. Pereira played an abysmal pass straight into the feet of Maguire, and that was that over. So I do think that for the most part, Man United defended pretty well. So we'll go into how it looked when Man United had the ball, because it was very different and interesting. So Fulham defended in a 4-4-2 similarly to Man United, but Man United attacked rather than a 3-2-5. They actually attacked in a 3-1-6, which is quite an aggressive formation to attack in. But Fernandes went centre forward, Mount was kind of in this position, and Rashford inverted quite often and actually became a number 8 at times, with Dalot providing the width. And then what was really interesting is Diallo obviously came out on the right, but we'd see different variations. So for starters, we would sometimes see this, but that wasn't that common. Sometimes it would be this, but also what I found most interesting is sometimes you'd see Mazraoui making this run, Maguire splitting the centre-backs, and Casemiro dropping a bit deeper. And actually it was a lot more aggressive than this. They played really high, almost kind of in this position, and it meant that they got a lot of bodies in the middle of the pitch, and it forced it confused Fulham's backline a little bit, because they defended with this 4-4-2. It was quite narrow, but with Man United having 6 players in the attacking line, it meant that Tete and Robinson had to go wide to defend the threat of Dalot and Diallo getting in behind. But then you can see here, we've got an overload in this area of the pitch. Man United have 4 players versus, technically I'm talking about Lukic and Pereira, so it's a 4-versus-2 here. I mean, the alternative to defend against this is Bassi and Diop have to step up, but then you're leaving space in behind for the runs to come in, and that's also a threat. So Bassi and Diop did sit off a little bit, and to defend this kind of 4-versus-2 overload, Traore and Iwobi became really narrow to kind of block off the passing lanes in these positions. And whilst I think this did work for the majority of the game, it opened up a lot of passing lanes for Man United. Let's go take a quick look at the photo. Right, so you can see from this image that Man United are in this 3-1-6 formation. Diallo is off screen, but he is in that right winger area. And for starters, we can see what I said about that really narrow Fulham midfield. You can see they are all here. So you've got to remember Diallo is also in the right wing position, meaning Robinson's the one having to go out and close him down. So Iwobi's coming narrow to defend the threat of Mazraoui. The issue with this is that with Diallo out on the right and Dalot on the left, Man United have these really easy passing lanes that they can find the fullbacks or they can find the wingers really effectively, especially in this middle of the pitch situation, in like a mid transition. I don't know if that's an actual term, but I'm going to go with it anyway. You could also understand that Mainu was free a fair few times in between the front two and the midfield four, so he could receive the ball as well on the turn and try and play it into the little pockets. But Man United didn't struggle for passes. I think their passing options were certainly more effective than what we've seen them before. There are a lot of quick 1-2s that they can make to get out of tricky situations and get in behind the Fulham backline. And it did, as I mentioned as well, with Dalot hugging the touchline on the left-hand side and Diallo doing the same on the right-hand side, it did then mean that they are really stretching that Fulham defence. And I think Fulham didn't want to stretch as well because then it would open too many passing lanes, but they knew they still had to some way defend that attack. Or defend them threat from the wide areas. And you can also see what I said about it being a high line. You can see there's the back three of Man United. You can't see Onana in the picture, but he's much higher, almost at the edge of his box, maybe even a bit further out. And what I think that gets the best out of Onana is we saw last season in the tight areas he gave the ball away quite often when he panicked. He got the ball, would kick it long, give the ball away, and they'd lose possession. I think with them playing a higher line, you've got to understand they don't necessarily have pace at the back, so it's a riskier approach, but it does also mean that Onana can sweep that ball over the top. He can pick that up quite easily, clear it, and it kind of suits his style of play a lot better. He's got time on the ball to pick out his passes rather than be under a lot of pressure, and I think it benefits both the Man United defence and it benefits Onana, and I think that's a main issue that has been resolved in this situation. The one thing I didn't like is, as you can see, Kobbie Mainoo is a single pivot. Whilst I think it worked today, I did think a couple times you could see when Fulham won the ball back, this is Emile Smith-Rowe here and Pereira is here. As soon as Muniz jumped forward when they won the ball back, Mainoo was then tasked with having to deal with both Smith-Rowe and Pereira, so there was space here and... let me make it a bit clearer. There's space here and here for Fulham to attack, and it was Pereira and Smith-Rowe that were the ones often getting in them positions that caused Man United a bit of issues on the transition. But for the most part, we didn't see that often, so it wasn't a major cause for concern, but I do think it's something they need to be wary about, playing a single pivot. The last thing I want to mention in this photo as well, you can see 2 minutes in, there's so much to unpack already. Look at the positioning of Rashford, Mount and Fernandes in this area here. They've picked up the perfect pocket, and by that I mean you can see there's the Fulham defensive line, there's the Fulham midfield line. They are exactly in between the two, and so it means they've ended up with pockets where passes can come in between, or out wide and then inside. They're all perfectly viable options because they've overloaded the middle of the pitch. It means that Fulham are outnumbered and the passing lanes are open, and they have put themselves in a position where as soon as they receive the ball, it takes Fulham's midfield press out of the game already, and then it's an attack versus defence situation. And again, Man United ended up in some really good positions. We saw a couple times where Bruno did have this kind of situation. Casemiro would then play him in behind, and Bruno Fernandes should have had a couple goals today, but their threat was certainly there. And I don't think Man United, what we've seen before, I don't think they struggled with the same issues today. And then obviously towards the end of the game, what was it, like the 85th, 87th minute, around about then, Joshua Zirkzee gets his debut goal. And we're going to run through this very quickly, but we're going to run through this. So we can see here the ball's on the left-hand side. look at where Joshua Zirkzee is. He's over here in the middle of the pitch. What you're expecting him to do here is just push forward. You're expecting him to start sprinting in behind that Fulham defence. And he kind of tricks the Fulham defenders into thinking that. Look at Calvin Bassey here. He's already anticipated that Joshua Zirkzee run, and his body positioning is he's turned sprinting back towards his own goal to try and prevent Zirkzee from getting any over-the-top ball in behind. Brilliant. Love that. That's pretty standard. Then look into the next photo here. You can see Calvin Bassey has recovered. Guess who's not actually made that run, though? It's Joshua Zirkzee. He's kind of held his run in the middle of the pitch. And you can see that this, granted you've got the benefit also of having Bruno Fernandes being the player on the ball, this pass is on. And it means, look at the space that he has. He's got all of this space to work in. He's pretty much occupying the middle of the pitch on his own, where Rashford and I think it's Garnacho at this point are able to make the overlapping runs in the wide positions. And I loved this. I thought as soon as I saw it, it reminded me of his Bologna times. And I've seen a lot of comparisons to Joshua Zirkzee. I've seen him linked to like Ibrahimovic, Van Nistelrooy, so many different players, Ronaldinho as well. There's a lot of comparisons, but my favourite one that I've seen has been to Bobby Firmino. And it's very interesting because stylistically and physically they're very different. But in terms of the positions that they take up on the pitch, they are almost identical. And I think it suits the Man United system really well. So let's go on to the next photo. We can see he's now got the ball deeper. McTominay's running behind him. Garnacho has picked up some space on the right-hand side, and Rashford is also free on the left-hand side, kind of. And you can also see Bruno is starting to make a run forward. And I think what it affords with all that space that Zirkzee had is time, and he had time to pick out the pass. He plays a pretty simple ball out wide, nothing special. You almost think at this point the attack could be over. And it goes out wide to Garnacho. But look, if we look at the two here, in the time he's made this pass and Garnacho has made the run to here, Joshua Zirkzee has gone from this position, almost midway in the defensive half, into the box. Here he is now, making a run into the box. And this cross comes in, he gets a little flick onto it, and obviously then, as we saw, the ball goes into the back of the net over here. And it's a really nice move from Joshua Zirkzee, and I think it's signs of things to come. He linked the play up and then scored himself. It's an epitome of confusing the defenders and holding a bit deeper. He almost looked like he was going to try and play a through ball for Rashford or Garnacho to get onto the end of, but as soon as he realised that the Fulham defence had recovered, he stayed deep, he played the ball sensibly, made the run into the box, and he got rewarded for it. And it reminds me a lot of what we saw at Bologna. I'm going to show you a goal here. This is Joshua Zirkzee here. He's in a pretty normal striker position. Nothing special, but you can see he's a little bit deeper. He's not looking to make a run. He's just stationary, waiting to see what happens. He's analysing the game. You can see he's looking at the ball, waiting to see what happens. He gets the ball in this situation. It's a bit different to the Man United one in terms that he's getting closed down a bit more. He's not got as much space, but he's in a similar position. You've got the player here making a run. I think that's Christensen. Looks a bit like what Rashford was doing. You've got the player out here making a run, a bit like Garnacho was doing. And you'd think in this situation he's going to play the ball out here. He actually doesn't. He plays a very smart ball in behind for Christensen to get onto the end of. And eventually the ball comes into the box. This ball gets laid off, and Joshua Zirkzee, here he is again, attacking the box at the right time, gets on the end of it and scores to make it 2-1 to Bologna against Lazio. So he's almost just taken what he's done at Bologna and applied it to what he's done at Man United. I think he had a brilliant debut. I think he's got signs of good things to come, and I really like what he showed. However, I don't think he was the star man of today. Despite scoring on his debut, I think someone else had a better debut, and that was Mazraoui. I think he was sensational today. He had a 92% pass accuracy. He won 6 out of his 7 duels, including all 3 of his ground duels, showing he's pretty good in the air as well. He made 5 ball recoveries, and he completed 2 tackles. He was sensational today. He played about 80 minutes of the game. Considering he only signed on Monday, the fact that he's fitted into this team so well already within 5 days is quite simply outstanding, and the positions he was picking up were really impressive. He noticed when Casemiro stayed deep and Kobbie Mainoo was in the single pivot, Mazraoui would attack the half space in the attacking line of 6. He would also sometimes be the right centre-back of a back 3 when Casemiro pushed higher and Mainoo was in the single pivot. He also just was everywhere where Fulham didn't want him to be. He played progressive passes. He played a lot of 1-2s where he could open up space in the middle of the pitch. I thought he was actually going to play on the left-hand side of the back 4 today. He did play on the right instead. But he is so two-footed as well. We saw him use both his right and left foot in many situations to get him out of danger. I think Mazraoui was, for me, my man of the match. I think he was sensational. And the fact that they only paid about 18 million for him is quite a scary thought, because he's only going to get better as he embeds himself in that club a bit more, gets used to the system even more. And you've got to remember he did play with Ten Hag at Ajax before, so maybe that's where a lot of the tactical know-how has come. But I just think what he did yesterday was brilliant, and I'm scared and excited to see what he does. I do also think Maguire had a sensational game. We've memed him before, but his composure, his aerial prowess, his reading of the game seems to have just really stepped up. And I actually don't know where De Ligt is going to go into this team. Unless Martinez plays left back and De Ligt plays alongside him, I really don't know how they're going to get Maguire out of this lineup. I think he's been so good the last 6 months to 9 months or so. And fair play to Man United. I am very impressed, and I'm a little scared for Man United this season. I did make a tweet. I predicted them to finish 6th, I believe, maybe 5th. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm not too far off on that one. So, Man United fans, you should be excited. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you all very soon. Make sure you go check out this video as well, and hit that subscribe button down below. But until next time, with a lot more Premier League content coming, I'll see you very soon.